How's it going, guys? I'm Brandon from Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. I've been getting a lot of questions lately on how I build my tapering jigs, so I figured I'd make a video for you guys and show you just how I do it. Stay tuned. To start this project off, I got everything unpacked and laid out. All the hardware I used for this jig was supplied by Rockler. I got their universal hold down kit, which includes 4 feet of T-track, 2 hold down clamps, 2 3-inch T-bolts, 2 5-star knobs, and 2 washers. I also got 2 more 3-inch T-bolts and 2 more 5-star knobs, as well as 2 big fender washers. So the wood portion of this jig just consists of 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, one cut at 30 inches by 12 inches, and one cut at 28 inches by 3.5 inches. I went through my plywood scrap pile and I had a couple pieces that would work, so I started to cut them down to size. If you don't have a crosscut sled, you can use a miter gauge or a circular saw to cut this piece to length. If you are interested in making a crosscut sled, I do have a video on that and I'll link it up in the top corner of this video. I'll also link all the tools and hardware I use in this video in the description below for you guys, as well as the measurements for this jig. Once I got the main body of the jig cut to length, I went ahead and ripped it down to width, which is 12 inches. After that, I ripped what I'm going to call the taper adjustment rail to width, and then I took it over the miter saw and cut it down to length. What I'm doing here is measuring for the dados I will cut for the T-track. I measured in from the outside 4 inches and drew a line on both sides. Then I laid out the T-track on the inside of the drawn lines and drew another line on the other side of the track so I knew where to cut the dado. I went ahead and set up my miter gauge with a fresh sacrificial fence just made from a scrap piece of plywood, and then made a cut through it. Then I set my blade to just a hair higher than the T-track depth, which is 3/8 of an inch. I used a square to continue my marks onto the edge of the board so I could see where to start and stop my dado cuts. If you have a dado stack, now would be a good time to use it, but if you don't, I'll show you how you can use a standard blade to make all these cuts. Make your first cut on the inside of each line and then make blade width cuts, moving the board each time a little bit to clear out the material between the lines. Once you're done with all that, you're left with a perfect dado cut without a dado stack. Next, I needed to make a dado cut on the top of what we're calling the taper adjustment rail to accept the T-track. I found the center of the board and marked out where I wanted it to lay. The T-track is 3/4 inches wide. I again used the track itself to mark the cut lines and making sure to transfer those to the edge. Once everything was marked out, I headed back over to the table saw, using basically the same method to cut out this dado, except I used the fence and I made sure to run the board all the way through each time instead of sliding it back and forth, because you don't have a fence on the back side to support it. Once that was finished, I headed over to the miter saw and cut the T-track down to size. You'll need 2 pieces at 11 and 7/8 inches and 1 piece at 17 inches. I should mention this is an aluminum T-track and I'm using a fine tooth blade which allows me to cut it on the miter saw. If this was a ferrous metal, you definitely would not want to use a miter saw with this. Just saying. When laying the T-track in the slot, make sure to center it so it doesn't sit flush with the edge of the board on either side. This will prevent it from hitting your table saw blade, which could really cause problems on saws like SawStop, because it is metal and it would activate the blade stop. I use coarse 3/4 inch screws to install the T-track when I do it. Then I just flip the board over using a flap wheel on an angle grinder. I sanded them down just below the surface of the wood so they won't touch the table saw bed. Could use shorter screws, but I found out when you go shorter, they actually get smaller around and have less holding power. For the next step, I needed to create slots in the tapering adjustment rail for the other set of T-bolts to pass through. I found the center of the board and I drew a line with my straight edge from end to end. After that, I measured in 1.5 inches on each side and made a mark on the center line, and then made another mark 4 more inches in from that. I used a 3/8 inch bit to drill holes on both of my marks on each end of the board. Then using a ruler, I drew lines to connect the holes. Then I cleared out the remaining material with my jigsaw. Then I installed the 17-inch piece of T-track the same way as I did on the main body, making sure to flip it over and grind off the exposed screws. Then it was time for assembly. You could put a miter bar on this jig, but I just set my fence to 12 inches, the width of the jig, and then run it up against my table saw fence, and it works just fine. Time to make some test cuts. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. I did want to let you guys know that Rockler does offer a tapering jig that's real similar to this one. It runs about $100 plus shipping, but for about half that cost and a little bit of your time, you can make your own. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and it was informative to you. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't already to the channel, and check out the video I have listed up here for you as well. I'll see you guys on the next one.